My husband smirked and called me, the drive. I left 400 pages of federal evidence, and a live Bluetooth speaker, to trigger an FBI raid. I drove 45 minutes in horrendous Boston weekend traffic to this location. I wrapped a large silver gift box with a navy ribbon myself because I do everything. My life revolves around independence, and this story is about it. The hostess stared at her clipboard again and again, dragging her manicured finger along the column of names like people do when they're desperate to see a name appear. It didn't. I'm so sorry, she said with the precision of someone trained to deliver bad news to expensive-dressed folks. I don't see your name on the guest list. I bought a midnight blue silk midi dress for this occasion. I wore pearl earrings, properly styled hair, and my best heels saved for special occasions. Could you please check again? I respectfully and calmly asked. It might be under my married name. Sterling. Elena Sterling. Eleanor emerged as she turned to the second page of her clipboard. My mother-in-law usually appeared from the luxurious country club location, as if she had a mystical radar called by the subtle fragrance of someone else's social distress. Her custom silk gown was champagne-colored, massive jewels rested around her throat, and she held a crystal glass with what I would have bet my life savings was her fourth gin and tonic of the evening. Eleanor smiled at me in the grand entrance with my silver box and high heels. Not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had caught her victim in public. Did you actually think you were invited? She questioned, purposefully loud enough for the three bridesmaids behind her to hear every word. She leaned in close enough for me to smell juniper and costly perfume on her skin. How utterly pathetic. Bridesmaids smiled together, as if societal permission to be harsh had been granted. I ignored them. I looked at my hubby. Julian was around 10 feet from the elaborate floral entry table. He was holding a champagne glass and his tuxedo tie was slightly slack, looking like the person he always was around his family. He appeared larger, louder, and arrogant in a way he only recalled being allowed to be when I wasn't his audience. He witnessed the entire exchange. He stood and watched his mother bend into my face and laugh at me. He caught my sight for a moment, then purposefully looked past me toward the open bar. Julian kindly told the hostess, "She's just the driver," sounding dismissive. "She's just dropping off a gift for my sister." The hostess blinked, surprised. Behind their hands, bridesmaids laughed. 4 senior guests at the coat check watched the humiliation. Something deep happened in my chest at that split second. In the months since, I've attempted to describe it to my therapist and lawyer, but I can never express its seriousness. It wasn't shame. I had spent 8 years carefully working to overcome that emotion of the Sterling family. My body briefly considered something other than anguish, blazing wrath, or the searing, humiliating sting of tears, silent, cold, and far more dangerous. My brain went absolutely, terrifyingly still. Background string quartet noise faded into white noise. The visitors' embarrassing looks flowed over me like water off glass. I grinned. The smile wasn't sad or apologetic. The smile wasn't meant for human connection, thus it didn't reach the eyes. "Of course," I whispered, calmly. "Then please ensure the bride and groom receive this." Walking forward, I placed the silver box on the foyer table. Naval ribbon. Perfectly square. Heavy. Much heavier than a crystal vase or good china dinner plates should be. Lovely. Precise wrapping. I did not cry when I turned around, walked back through the magnificent entrance, crossed the vast gravel parking lot in my heels, and got into my automobile. I drove 3 blocks, stopped under a huge weeping willow tree on a quiet, upscale residential street, shut the engine, and waited in the dark. None of those country club members knew this about me. My name is Elena Sterling. My age is 33. I'm a senior risk analyst at a top Boston financial forensics business. I spend my career unearthing the dark, hidden secrets desperate people try to hide in intricate statistics. I want disparities. I seek for illogical behavior. I uncover big deceptions, disguised as business deals. I do my job really well. And exactly 3 months ago, I was sitting at his costly mahogany home office desk at 2A, while my husband Julian was supposed to be spending a lengthy, boys-only weekend at a Martha's Vineyard golf club with his college fraternity mates. As I watched his secret digital wall safe open again, the home was absolutely black and quiet. I could unlock it because I had carelessly jotted down the combination the first time I observed him open it nearly 3 years previously, storing the 6-digit number in a secure vault in my memory for future use. I'm also really good at that. After 8 hard years with Julian Sterling, I realized the awful reality of what I had married into. Our paths crossed at a high-profile gala for a youth reading foundation where I had volunteered since college, when I was 24 and he was 28. He was charming in the highly addictive way of gorgeous men who have been taught they are special since birth. He was attentive, spontaneously hilarious, and magnetic when he wanted to be. He was finishing his MBA at a top university. He had crippling student loan debt, but his blinding optimism in his future made it appear like a transitory clerical error rather than a scary financial reality. My first entry-level analytic job paid well. Private jet money wasn't extravagant, but it was enough to live comfortably. I cheerfully paid for our dinners as he finished his difficult degree since I loved him. When his new financial firm's promised signing bonus was strangely delayed by 6 weeks, 12 weeks, and finally stopped being mentioned, I quietly paid the enormous rent difference. I justified everything. I figured these were short-term financial imbalances in a long-term, equitable relationship. Julian's mother, Eleanor Sterling, possessed money like a dominant personality trait. It structured everything in her life. Her boutique consulting firm had made her rich during the late 1990s tech boom, and she had spent the next 2 decades relentlessly transforming that fortune into impenetrable social status. Maintaining social status was a full-time job in her affluent Boston circles. Eleanor was sharp, dramatic, and had the terrible capacity to make you feel like your shoes were slightly off, your posture was insulting, and your entire existence was a minor inconvenience to her day with a single glance. She never liked me. Not from our first introductory supper, our wedding day, or ever. Not from the right family. I wasn't from the right wealth generation. I was an outsider who had entered her carefully controlled world for Julian. She treated me civilly, but only in the manner that extreme class women do, with weaponized politeness that is basically a protracted, exquisite dismissal. Many years, I persuaded myself her opinion didn't matter. I convinced myself, Julian chose me, not his mother. I told myself that soothing falsehood for 8 years. 18 months into our marriage, the first crack developed. We attended Julian's senior partner's fancy dinner party. After using the restroom, I stopped behind a pillar and heard him describe me to a senior partner. He termed me supportive in the background. It sounds like a compliment but is actually a method to put someone in the background. We drove home silently that night, trying to convince myself he was anxious. I rationalized that it was just the social pressure of high-stakes, client-facing events and that his statements weren't significant. The second, larger break, smashed the glass completely. Julian eventually became a partner at his firm. I had worked 60-hour weeks at my own job, racking up my own overtime, not his, to build a solid savings account to cover our massive financial gap when his variable compensation came in shockingly low, during the 2 lean years it took him to climb the corporate ladder. Eleanor prepared a huge celebratory dinner at an elite downtown restaurant with leather-bound menus that don't list costs after his partnership was confirmed. Triumphant Eleanor sat at the head of the long table. Julian's younger sister Chloe sat alongside him. I was sent to the other end of the table with a deaf great-uncle. Eleanor stepped up and tapped her crystal glass to give a 10-minute toast to Julian's amazing endurance and solitary successes, never mentioning me. I gripped the steering wheel as I drove home from supper, terrified. If this is the pattern, what does it become? I buried the question in my head, and continued. Ironically, the affair was the most banal discovery. I found it by mistake, as people always do, when they should have been actively hunting for it earlier. Unlocked phone on kitchen island. Maya, an unfamiliar name, appeared 4 times in an hour on Sunday morning. No screaming. I didn't throw dishes. Never confronted him. Currently a forensic analyst. Documenting. Not confronting. My subtle discovery after 3 weeks verified the affair. His firm has a 6-year-old junior associate, Maya. I found 18 months of explicit communications, hotel receipts, and calendar anomalies that revealed their ill relationship. My blood didn't freeze because of the affair. It was money. The night Julian kissed my cheek, grabbed his golf clubs, and went for his purported boys' trip to Martha's Vineyard, I waited 2 hours after his Porsche left our driveway. I entered his home office, shut the door, sat at his clean desk, and entered the 6-digit code to open the digital wall safe. A laptop I had never seen was within the steel chamber under a stack of passports. It was matte black, unbranded, and fully encrypted. It was the machine you buy because it's untraceable. Next to it was a small high-capacity thumb drive fastened to the safe door with thick black electrical tape. It is where a conceited genius hides something they feel will never be found. In the kitchen, I put on blue nitrile gloves, the kind I keep in my home office for sensitive physical document work, and started the laptop. A senior risk analyst in sophisticated financial forensics. I spent the previous 11 years methodically understanding how money moves across borders, hides in plain sight, and how its digital trail can be correctly charted if you know what microscopic irregularities to look for. I was an expert witness in 3 significant federal financial lawsuits. My government security clearance and Northwestern University digital forensic accounting certification are not authorized to be mentioned in this report. I needed 10 hours of unblinking, frightening analysis to understand what was on that matte black laptop. Corporate theft was mastered. After 8 years of taking the stifling weight of another person's existence while being told I was just a supplement, my hands were stiller than ever. Sikis. Kurt Besh PMA. I called the burner number. After using the sworn witness testimony in the public court record, I was able to precisely reconstruct what happened inside that vast $300,000 tent. In a comical turn of events, the best man, Leo, carried the hefty silver box to the head table as planned. He would later joyfully collaborate with federal investigators and wear a wire in exchange for full legal immunity. He put it in front of Chloe. The bride was still shining in her stolen designer dress, holding a crystal flute of stolen champagne, radiating the insufferable glee of a woman who believes she is the center of the universe and hasn't understood galaxies have scary boundaries. Julian was sitting next to her at the head table when the parcel arrived. He saw the crisp navy ribbon and scoffed loudly. Leo later testified that Julian said, "It's probably something cheap and sad from Elena. Let's get it out of the way." Julian arrogantly grabbed the box and removed the lid. Julian reached inside the package and grabbed the burner phone that rang quickly. He did, obviously. His ego sought control. Since I had set it to auto-answer, his voice boomed over the disguised Bluetooth speaker as he clutched the phone. He asked, "Hello?" He seemed shocked and amused. It was the arrogant tone of a man who assumed any slight inconvenience would be readily handled. My voice then replaced his, reverberating across the empty tent at maximum volume. "I hope everyone is thoroughly enjoying this $300,000 wedding," I said. I spoke in a steely, crisp, heatless voice, especially the senior partners from Julian's firm who are in attendance tonight. The tent went silent. 3 sworn witnesses described it as the oppressive quiet that occurs when a crowd is hit with something too big for their brains to process. With silver forks halfway to their mouths, senior partners froze. Julian's brilliant, merciless managing director, Arthur Pendleton, a guy with 26 years of institutional memory who noted everything, slowly moved his chair back from his table, his eyes narrowing. "Every single rare flower on your tables," I said, echoing from the box. "Every drop of vintage champagne in your glasses. Every single handcrafted stitch of the dress the bride is currently wearing. All of it was paid for with $5.2 million of stolen, laundered money." Eleanor rose instantly. Leo said she crossed the raised platform with the frenzied, fearful intensity of someone who knows what is occurring and is 3 seconds too late to stop it. She violently seized the silver box. She frantically tore through the well-organized tabs, scattering heavy archival pages. She desperately searched 400 pages of damning federal documents for the speaker. Her logical brain must have realized that the longer she looked at the papers, the worse it would get, even in her blind, animalistic panic. Julian dropped the burner phone on the table like it burned his hand. "Not a problem." The speaker broadcast while secured to the box bottom. "I know all about the Cayman Island shell accounts, Eleanor," I said coldly. "I know exactly how you structured the Peterson acquisition escrow diversions. I know about the IP addresses. I know about the fake vendor accounts. I know about all of it." I stopped for 2 seconds. I timed the dramatic beat "Oh, you called me just the driver tonight, Julian," I whispered, piercing the tense silence. "You were wrong. I'm the federal whistleblower." The call ended immediately. Only 3 seconds of absolute, paralyzing stillness existed inside the tent. Then, the country club's massive wrought iron front gates exploded with red and blue strobe lights. 4 massive black FBI tactical SUVs and 3 local police cruisers smashed through the pristine gravel driveway. Dark FBI windbreaker-clad 15 agents flooded the grand tent. They moved with the terrifying, organized efficiency of professionals who had done this maneuver 100 times before and were completely unimpressed by the $30,000 floral arrangements they were trampling over. Special Agent Victor Hayes personally led the raid. Later, I discovered that detail. He intentionally executed the warrants on this night after 14 years in high-level financial crimes. The crowd would include Julian's senior partners, he knew. He knew the undeniable evidence could be physically seized in a dramatic way, to maximize its legal utility and visibility to the violently defrauded professional community. Agent Hayes knew optics well. Respected that completely. Eleanor Sterling was violently handcuffed at the head table. In front of every wealthy socialite she had ever lunched with, every prestigious charity board member she had ever manipulated, and every person whose respect she had spent 30 years aggressively purchasing with stolen money, she was restrained. The agents forced her out of the tent with the heavy diamonds at her throat. She screams. Every witness account used screaming. Her champagne-colored gown dragged through the wine, spilled on the floor as she screamed obscenities at the agents. However, my 400-page dossier was scattered across the white dance floor by then. The federal agents had taken the silver box, Bluetooth speaker, burner phone, an exact copy of the evidence I had spent 21 days building to eliminate legal gaps. No screams from Julian. Julian kneeled immediately. I remembered that detail longer than expected. It didn't make me feel instantly satisfied. The feeling of a fundamental truth being confirmed was deeper. He kneeled because arrogant people do that when the crushing weight of what they've done carried for so long inside the fragile fiction of a wildly successful life finally hits them. Always, knees give out first. Everything else collapses. As her dream wedding became a federal crime scene, Chloe stood frozen in her stolen designer dress and cried at the head table. I watched red and blue police lights flashing through the thick branches of the weeping willow tree from my dark sedan 3 blocks away. Didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I didn't drink champagne. After 8 years of painful declines, I didn't feel vindicated. Every dinner I was forced to sit at the wrong end of the table came to mind. I thought about every introduction where I was called supportive in the background. I remembered the night my husband confidently told a hostess I was the driver. Put the car in drive. He was partly right. I always drove. I had silently kept the machine running, covering the massive financial distance, and doing the exhausting, thankless work that never gets acknowledged, because acknowledging it means the people who need you admit they are completely dependent on you for 8 years. I drove home. The legal aftermath was horrific. Eleanor Sterling was indicted on 14 serious federal charges, including wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud, tax evasion, and others, which Samantha Reed cheerfully explained to me over the phone the morning the massive indictment was unsealed. Samantha read the federal document with the quiet, deep pleasure of a brilliant woman who has done this brutal work for 22 years and still finds a clean indictment deeply satisfying. Julian faced 9 federal charges. He desperately hired a costly, aggressive defense attorney who spent 3 exhausting months trying to make a sympathetic case that Julian had been emotionally manipulated and misled by his domineering mother. The legal position might have been slightly sympathetic if my dossier hadn't included 60 pages of encrypted emails between the two of them, explicitly discussing the offshore routing structure in blunt language that left no room for misinterpretation. Julian broke under the weight of overwhelming evidence. He pleaded guilty to 3 major counts after extensive negotiations. He received 18 months in a minimum security federal prison, 3 years of strict probation, and massive financial restitution. A massive federal consent decree and a court-appointed monitor were immediately imposed on the advisory firm, or what was left of its reputation. Arthur Pendleton, the managing director who watched the raid from the tent that night, became the aggressively restructured entity's de facto leader. He called my office 3 weeks after the high-profile arrest to thank me for exposing the rot before it destroyed the company. I ended the strange, surreal conversation quickly and professionally. Exactly 7 months after I served him the papers, we divorced. Samantha terrorized the courtroom. She obtained a brutal settlement that legally required the return of my full financial contribution over our 8-year marriage, calculated to the dollar using my own flawless dossier records from Tab E, plus aggressive compound interest. I received the marital home, where my initial down payment was 60% of the equity. Julian signed the divorce papers in federal custody. I only read one message from his defeated attorney, which Samantha forwarded to my email. I hope you realize how much of this destruction you caused. I read the sad words. I wasn't mad. I felt nothing. I deleted the email, put my phone down, and resumed my forensic document. This story concludes without a big cinematic bang. It arrives quietly, as things end when they're real. 14 months after that chaotic night at the country club, I was sitting on the back porch of my massive marital home, which I now owned and had always carried the financial burden of. On a crisp Sunday morning in early October, I read a book with a hot cup of black coffee. It was very quiet in the wealthy neighborhood. The light through the trees was the color of that golden autumn sunshine that has always made me feel like everything will be okay for no reason. I heard my phone buzz on the wrought iron table next to me. I set up a Google News alert months earlier. Eleanor Sterling gets 84 months in federal prison. $5.2 million restitution. To confirm my eyesight, I read the stark headline twice. I calmly placed my phone face down on the glass table, grabbed my coffee mug, and looked out at the quiet street. I considered the venue's grand entry table. I considered the navy ribbon's purity, thinking about the hostess's careful, trained face. I remembered Julian's arrogant smirk as he reached for the ringing phone in the silver box, so confident, so slightly contemptuous, so sure that whatever minor issue came his way would be easily handled. I thought about the 8 years I spent believing that being financially useful was the same as being romantically valued. I considered how working quietly and tirelessly in the background was a slow, agonizing disappearance rather than an equal partnership. After inhaling the cold autumn air, I stopped thinking about them. Just finished coffee. I stood, entered my quiet, beautiful home, and went to my office. I opened my secure laptop and began a new investigative document for a large case my firm had brought me earlier that week. A massive international real estate fund had a bizarre discrepancy pattern that could be a clerical error or the start of something much bigger and darker. My extensive experience suggested the latter. A new folder opened. I cracked my knuckles and started work on Tab A. She's just the driver. Julian sneered at the hostess that night. He wasn't wrong. I drove the car always. The biggest difference, the one fundamental truth he never understood and none of those arrogant people understood until it was too late, is that the driver always chooses the destination.